The need to put yourself first is absolutely essential um, in order to not get in your own way. And it's not selfish. A lot of times people think if you put yourself first, that means that you're putting everybody else last. And that kind of either or black and white thinking is something we want to get away from, because it's perfectly possible to put yourself first and to think of other people as well. But I can still put myself first in order to know what it is that I really want. And have you ever noticed how little children put themselves first? I mean, it's how we start out. They're the only one who can tell the parent what it is that they need. And that could be, survival based for a baby and for a small child. So, thank goodness we start out that way. We could just hold on to a little more of that into our adult lives and be able to, create the kind of life that gives us good energy and takes us where we want to go. Because if you don't do that, if you're not putting yourself first in your own life, then you are really in danger of developing a false self, that kind of personality that is designed to make other people feel more important than you. Then you start involuntarily applying it to other people. Like, you might be thinking, well, I gave up what I wanted. Why can't you give up what you want in a relationship? Or you might say, well, I'm self-sacrificing. Why can't you sacrifice for me? I mean, that stuff comes out. You don't get away from it. And so if you own it, if you own your inner toddler, the part of you that knows what you want, and you think of other people, you find a way of getting most of what you want while taking other people into account. But you have a guide star. You have a way of knowing which way you're going and what it is that you want to accomplish. If you don't do it, you also can end up with addictions. Okay, because lots of times people are like, well, if I can't do what I really want to do, I'm going to do something that I can do. And they might take a shortcut into the relief or the good feeling of an addiction, which is just, a really tragic loss. And people think that addicts are, so selfish, or they don't think of other people. I think it's exactly the opposite. I think that they shut themselves down for whatever reason so much that they were very vulnerable to the experience that the substance or the activity brings them. And I think it's because they got out of touch with what they really wanted in their lives and had to settle for something else. So we want to develop our knowledge of ourselves and kind of create an owner's manual for ourselves about what we need to put ourselves first in life. Listening to our inner guidance is a very important way of developing that owner's manual. It's the still small voice. It's that quiet, it's not showy, it's not insistent. It's just sort of a quiet, small little voice that tells you what you really think or what you really want. So in order to hear that voice, here are some suggestions. Like, take yourself to a place where you're a stranger, where nobody knows you, where there's no expectation that you should have this or that personality. And in this place, you allow yourself to just see what you're thinking about. Maybe take some paper with you and a journal with you and make some notes so that you begin to get some inner guidance from it. And you're not expecting a big revelation. You're just looking for a little tiny bit of inspiration, maybe a little idea that you could test out. But that way of going off to a new place and then just letting yourself sit and be is a very good way of beginning to hear that voice. I wanted to just read to you a couple of things that help you to differentiate between the ego voice and the still small voice, the voice that gets in your way and holds you back and scares you, and the voice that gives you really good information about which way to go next. So the still small voice uses usually very short, unemotional statements, whereas the ego voice is very wordy, it's very anxious, very emotional, it's very insistent, has a lot of opinions with a lot of, heat behind it. And the still small voice is just that. It's still. It just gives you a little idea, but it has a quality of truth about it if you listen to it. And it also, when you listen to it, it tends to relieve stress. You have a sense of, oh, now I know what to do, or now I know the answer. Whereas when the ego speaks, it feels stressful, like, oh, that's what I've got to do. Oh, I've got to think about that. Gee, I don't think I did that well enough. There's a pressure to it. So we want to tune in to good feelings, relaxed feelings, inspired feelings, and the sense that we are being pressured and pushed, which is how the ego tends to come across. When it comes to the kind of problems that are likely to crop up when we start to find our own path, I always like to play with the idea that, maybe there is a constant of problems in each person's life. By that I mean, maybe you're going to have, 4,263 problems in your life. And that's the number. But you can choose what you want those problems to be. It's a useful way to think that what if you're always going to have problems, because we're given this set number of problems when we're born, but what if you were to decide that I'm going to make 150 of these, how to get higher education, how to get a new job, how to start a career in a more creative type of work. What if you began to think about choosing problems, not running away from them, not avoiding them, but picking your problems that you're going to put your energy into, and that when you do that, you lose 150 other problems that would have happened if you had done nothing on your own behalf. The more problems I picked that had to do with me going after more of what I was interested in or more of what I wanted, the fewer problems I had that were generated by other things like, being unhappy, being frustrated, not making as much money as I wanted to, not feeling as fulfilled as I wanted to. I really noticed the shift in the type of problem I was facing, so that a lot of times I'm thinking, yeah, this is a huge problem, but aren't I lucky to have this kind of problem? This is in the service of, having a bigger, better life that's going to bring me more. So, yeah, I don't know if we can truly pick our problems, but I do know that when you decide what you want to put your energy toward, I want my struggles to be very high quality, as high quality as I can get them anyway, because I don't expect that I'm not going to have struggles, that I'm not going to need to call on endurance or persistence. I know that's going to happen if I'm trying to do what I dream of. But keep in mind that just because something is going to cause a problem or it's going to be hard, there are plenty of other things that you could be doing that would be just as hard and just as problematic, but you wouldn't be getting any payoff from it because it wouldn't be something that you had initiated for your own life. So how do we get rid of, or how do we change these early schemas? The first thing is you must know what the schema is. If you can write down what the belief is that's holding you back or that's causing you fear, causing you anxiety, you are taking the first important step to get at an old depiction of reality. You have an idea about reality and then include yourself that is not serving you well. If you can get that into words, then you have a chance of really changing it. Remember I said that, these ideas, these schemas exist like in a grab bag, and you can reach in there and pull them out, and they don't necessarily have to have anything to do with each other. Lots of times they're contradictory, but we don't know that because we're really pulling them out one at a time. And by themselves, they look like that they make sense, or that they're, like the voice of God, some kind of absolute truth. It isn't until you begin to think about them, and this is very important, notice your feeling about them. It isn't until you can do those things that you begin to be able to tell whether or not these schemas are, true, and are they able to guide you toward what it is that you need and what you want. I had a client once, she was having trouble submitting a proposal for something at work that was a very big deal, and she had a great idea. She had come up with this. She knew that it was really going to be an important suggestion and offering to her work team. And so she's ready to do it, and she's like petrified, scared to death. All of a sudden, she can't think straight. She has self-doubt. She wonders if it's really such a great idea or not. She remembers that guy that always, looks down his nose at everybody in every meeting. She thinks about how her boss, really seems to prefer this other person on the team to her. She goes into this whole thing. And so I asked her, focus on the feeling. Describe the feeling to me as best you can. Sit in the dirty diaper, stay with that feeling, and keep talking to me out of that feeling. So she's saying, I feel terrible, I feel scared, I feel, and I'm like, there's a view of yourself in there somewhere. What is it? Who are you when you are feeling this way about what you're doing? Think about what you are believing about yourself right this second. And she said, oh, I'm a dummy. And that clicked back into something that her mother used to say to her a lot when she was trying to get her to, stop being so rambunctious. And she'd say, stop being such a dummy. She had an old belief, a schema, that was very deep in there. It caused all these awful feelings. And I asked her how she felt when she thought that thought, I'm such a dummy. And she said, well, everything that I just told you. So what I asked her to do is, I said, a part of you believes that you're a dummy. Okay? Yeah, and it could be any statement. It's just got to capture the feeling that goes in there. This is not an intellectual exercise. It has to be a feeling. Capture the feeling, have the statement, and write it down on a piece of paper. And then every day for the next week, I want you to read this statement out loud to yourself twice a day. That's all I want you to do. Now, the interesting thing is that we were able to get to what the schema was. And I really questioned her about that quite a bit. Like, is there anything else in there? Does that capture it? And finally we got to, yep, I'm such a dummy was it. So that was the thing we put on the card. And that's what she did. So twice a day, she would take out the card. She would read it out loud and say, I'm such a dummy. And she would also think of what she thought of herself now as an adult. And she was like, I'm a capable, valuable part of my work team. I have good ideas. That's all I wanted her to do. I didn't want her to try to change her mind. I didn't want her to contradict the statement. I just wanted her to present it to her brain out loud so she could hear it. So she does that for a week, and she comes back in and she says, it's gone. I said, that made no sense at all. Well, what happened was that the brain does not like to be presented with two things that can't possibly coexist. You can't be such a dummy and be a valuable member of your work team. The difference this is so different from cognitive therapy and other types of therapy where you're trying to change a person's thought. We're trying to change a schema, which has an emotional component and a strong belief component. When the brain is told two things that can't possibly be compatible, can't go together, the brain will pick the one that is most based in reality, because the brain, after all these millennia of being human beings, it's really big on ascertaining what is reality. That's what the brain does. So when you give it those two statements and you hold those two bubbles together without trying to change either one of them, then what happens is that the brain will get rid of one of them. It just kicks it out.